Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Baker's Dozens project presentation. My name is Tommy Vu. Today, I will be joined by Stephen Golak and Clay Kilstra. Together, we form the group known as the Muffin Men. Before we delve into the information of the presentation itself, a quick overview of what will be talked about today. The project background, a system review, the budget, the challenges we have faced, the lessons we have learned, the deliverables we sought for, what we were able to deliver, and what was not delivered, our conclusion of the budget, schedule, scope, and functionality of the project, our recommendations for possible future upgrades, and acknowledgments to all that have helped us throughout this project's time. Any questions can be left down below. Project background. The idea for this project initially came from our group member Clay Kilstra. He worked at a bakery over the summer last year. To his surprise, they were not using a good inventory system, to say the least. They were using a paper and pad method. This method was more convenient than any other method that they had or could have had at that time, but it did introduce tons of problems with that. With that said, the goal for the Baker's Dozen project was to make a do-it-all inventory system. So this inventory system would update the inventory system itself. It would let the user view the inventory system items. It would also allow them to, it would also email the product manager of whenever a certain item has hit a certain threshold. So a quick system overview of all the things we have implemented into this project. Hardware side of things was quite simple. A i7 based PC was going to run a Windows Server 2016 operating system. Windows Server 2016 was picked just due to our knowledge of the operating system itself. And we also had an additional 1 terabyte hard drive for RAID 1 redundancy in case of a drive failure. The second i7 based PC that we had was Ubuntu Server 19.10 based. It had a GUI enabled for ease of use again, and an additional 1 terabyte hard drive for RAID 1 redundancy. For the networking side of things, 2 items were needed: a Cisco CRV320 router with DHCP pooling enabled, a Cisco CSG220-50 switch with VLANs enabled as well. Software-wise, there are several different softwares that were required for this project to come to light. For the Windows side of things, we required WAMP server for website hosting, Active Directory domain service for user-based permissions. Custom-made Python script for inventory tracking is the heart of the project itself. There are 2 different types of Python scripts that were used. One was used initially for raw ingredients, and the second one is used to showcase final products and a email system that would automatically send an email to the product manager when a certain item hit a certain threshold. And finally, DNS provision, so all DNS information was coming from the Windows Server itself. For the Ubuntu side of things, several softwares were needed. MySQL database for the database itself to host all that raw ingredient numbers and final product numbers. Apache Web Service was to host the MySQL database online so the Python script could communicate with the database itself. And PHPMyAdmin is used for a GUI-based configuration and management of the database itself. SendMail is used for the automated emailing service only. Networking side of things was also quite simple for us. The router and switch were interconnected with each other and are on a local network only. We do not have plans for this network to go outside. VLANs for different devices. VLAN 10 was used for raw ingredients, VLAN 20 is used for final products, and VLAN 99 is just our management side. Trunking was also enabled for all the VLANs just for intercommunication in case they needed to access certain things. DHG pool, as said before, was enabled on the router, and DNS information once again is still provided by the Windows server. Security-wise, there were several security features and techniques that we were using. A firewall was enabled for both servers, allowing and blocking specific ports. For an example, Ubuntu did allow port 25 just because that port is the SMTP port that was required for SendMail. SSL communication for both the Windows server and the Ubuntu server, case some malicious attempt was taken um, inside of the bakery. User-based credentials was used for the database and for the PCs themselves. Each user would have their own specific user credentials, and those users would have their own based permissions. So specific users were able to add an additional user for emailing services. Services were quite simple to add as well. As said before, Active Directory domain service, DNS service, and for the Ubuntu side of things, SendMail and MySQL database.
Hi, my name is Clay Kilstra. I'm going to be taking you through this next part of the presentation for Baker's Dozen. Overall, our budget came out to about $15,917.09. This includes both our labor and equipment costs for the project. The equipment in total cost only about $1,757, and most of the cost was made up from our hours worked. We will have a more detailed structure of our budget later in the presentation, so do stay tuned for that. The challenges of our project were far and few between. However, I managed to bring it down to about 4 of them that I found we should highlight. SendMail configuration we had issues with just due to we weren't really exposed to it, and I found trying to get it work with our external Active Directory on a different machine caused a few issues, but we were able to get around it. Network hardware was a bit older than we were expecting, and so our commands didn't work. We had to actually go online and find specific commands for the hardware we were using, and even then there was a bit of a learning curve compared to what we were used to in labs and classes. The SQL connections were one issue that was solved rather fastly, but a big one. This was basically where an external device couldn't connect to the SQL database, and the way we solved that was just by creating users that they connect to. The RAID configuration was definitely one of our bigger issues. When setting up RAID, we accidentally deleted the information on the computer, causing it so we actually lost about 3 weeks of progress. However, we managed to salvage it and get back to where we were within the week. Lessons learned. We learned 3 main lessons through our project, and I want to highlight each one of these. The importance of backups. Since COVID-19 forced us out of our lab environment, we had to really rebuild our entire setup from scratch using VMs. If we took backups of most of our files, this process would have been gone a lot faster and would have let us really work on the project. However, we had to spend a lot of time just rebuilding our systems. Always having a plan is something that I find very important for a project. Since we had our Gantt chart, we kind of knew where we were going, but we should have actually planned in lab. I find if we spent more time setting up the lab environment for the next day, so when we got in there, we could get straight to work rather than coming in the next day and then having to set everything up for whatever we were working on. For example, when I was working on the networking, I didn't actually have any of the proper cables for the day I wanted to do networking, so it actually took a day extra just to get started there. I should have actually looked at the hardware and figured out all the cables needed and necessary to hook up before I plan on doing networking. I will keep this lesson with me for the future. And our last lesson, of course, not every challenge is inherently bad. Since, of course, going back to the COVID-19 thing, we were kicked out of lab. However, this doesn't mean that it was inherently bad. Although, yes, we had to rebuild our systems, we also got to hone our skills a little bit more and really show that we do know how this all works. So I don't find it the worst thing ever. Deliverables. The Muffin Men will provide the bakery with the following items. One i7 desktop with 2 times 1 terabyte hard drives in RAID 1 configuration, hosting Windows Server 2016. We will also provide another desktop, very similar, except this time hosting Ubuntu Server 1910. We're going to also provide a a Cisco CRV320 router, and Cisco SG22050K9 switch with DHCP and VLANs pre-configured and ready to go. We also, of course, will have all necessary programs and components needed to run the Bacon Dozen inventory tracking program. This, of course, will include your SQL database, your SendMail server, and the two programs used throughout Baker's Dozen. Now, what was delivered out of those deliverables? We got both PCs with necessary services and programs installed, ready to go. The router and switch with DHCP and VLANs configured and ready for deployment. We have both Python programs and all the necessary components needed to run it. Now, what was not delivered? Well, a lot of the things we missed was our security features. These were the big things that we wanted to do at the end, and since COVID happened, we were unable to implement, and we're very sad about that. The big ones we missed, of course, were HTTPS for the inventory website, SSL being used for the SendMail messaging, and then also SSL for the website connection. These were things we had very late in our Gantt, and however, were unable to meet just due to the circumstances we were put in and the timing.
Hello, my name is Stephen Golak, and I will finish this presentation off with the conclusion section. So, the budget. When we calculated this, we initially said that all employees working on the project would get roughly $60 per hour. Now we took that number and we times it by our total hours, which was 236, and we got a rough number of $14,391.08. We added that number to the total hardware cost, which was formulated from two servers, one switch, one router, and one barcode, which came out to $1,525.29. Add those two together and we get a total overall cost of $15,917.09. For our schedule, we have it run from January 6th to April 3rd, a 14-week period where each user worked 6 hours roughly per week minimum in class. That math roughly comes to 236. Of course, we had to add outside work that we worked on it with. So that one roughly translates to 79 per person. For the scope of the project, we have for hardware two servers, one Windows Server 2016 and the other with Ubuntu Server OS. Also included on there is a layer 3 router, a layer 2 switch, and lastly a barcode scanner. For purposes, the Windows Server will hold the WAMP service, including MySQL database, as well as the HTML/PHP based website browser. Also contained in there is the Active Directory and DNS services to provide login access. And finally, on the Windows Server, we have two Python scripts, each providing a different importance to the program. Lastly, on the Ubuntu server side, we have mostly SendMail being used to send emails when inventory levels get to a certain point. For the functionality of the project, the base importance of it was to set up a way for employees at a bakery to track the raw ingredients and final products in the warehouse. The first part of our project that we worked on was setting up a interface for these to, in general, see the inventory levels of raw ingredients and final products. This was done using a HTML website that would have database connectivity. The second side of the project is meant for the warehouse workers. It's a Python script that runs a database connectivity that allows the user to add, remove, update all information pertaining to the database. The second script is meant to take the data and the raw ingredients and calculate how many final products or products in general can be created using those numbers. The last part and most interesting part is the SendMail part. So when an inventory part or section gets too low, the sendmail would kick in and notify either the warehouse manager or the say just an employee in general that it's too low, and then it will order more stock, or they will order more stock. For the recommendation section of the project, we found that the only real recommendation that needs to be done is the hardware. So in our case, the desktop computer is what we'd like to recommend. From our research, we found that a Dell Vestro or Vostro small desktop is perfect for this situation. The price is going from $509 to $900. It uses the Intel i5-9400 6-core processor. Its RAM is 8 gigabytes of DDR4, 2666 megahertz, and finally, our most important recommendation is the data storage. So we would like to say to use 2 1 terabyte hard drives to set up RAID 1 on the server. This will allow you to have database redundancy, so you don't lose data. So if one drive fails, the other one is up there to keep all data running. And finally, to conclude things, we'd like to acknowledge everyone who helped us work on this project, starting from Jason Fisher, who helped us all the way along with many different things. Andrew Campbell for providing us with confirmation on the idea and allowing us to start. And Clay Cleostra for writing all of the Python and networking. Stephen Golak for writing the HTML and websites. And Tommy Vu for doing the sendmail and database. And finally, we'd like to thank SATE for allowing us an opportunity to do this, as well as providing all hardware and components necessary to finish the assignment. Finally, we'd like to thank everyone for watching, and if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments section below. Thank you. Have a great day.